Hi everyone, this is Supriyo Guharoy. I am the Director of Presidency University, Bangalore. I also have a role in the group of Presidency Group of Institutions, which is the CEO of Presinova Management Solutions, which provides a lot of infrastructural support to the group's institutions. About my background, I am basically an engineer, born and brought up in Calcutta. I did my engineering from Jadavpur University way back in the 80s. And then I moved into the industry, worked as an engineer in a blue-collar job for some time. Thereafter, I did my MBA from IIM Bangalore, moved back into the corporate, but in a white-collar position, been into managerial roles, working both in India and abroad for more than 2 decades. And then sometimes towards, the early part of this decade, around 2013, I decided to hang up my boots in the corporates and decided to move into education sector. If I get an opportunity, I'll tell you what motivated me to move into education sector. But for the time being, I think it suffices to say that I found that the people from the industry, after having done their bit, need to move into education, and contribute to the extent they can. So that's briefly about myself, and I'm happy to be a part of this session being organized by Collegedunia. I know Collegedunia is doing a wonderful job reaching out to the students and the parent community, working as a bridge between the educational institutions and the student community as a whole, placing them well into the right place and therefore helping them in creating the right career. So thank you so much, Collegedunia, for having me on board.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Welcome to this interview. I hope to have a great interview, right, sir? Moving directly into the question, sir. So my first question, you've somewhat have already answered to a bit. Now, as we all know, so you held a very key position at an educational institute, right, sir? So that's one question we had. What are the key factors that keeps you connected with the sector?
Yeah, well, actually, as I told while introducing myself, while working in the industry, I was in a role where I used to go to various institutions, both engineering colleges, top-level engineering colleges, including IITs, as well as IIMs and equivalent MBA institutions, for recruiting talent. So that was one part of my job. But while actually visiting these premier institutions in the country, one thing I had frequently found out that there was a very small percentage of the students I used to interview were directly connected to the happenings in the industry. They may be starting in the premier institutions, but they were not up to the mark in the sense that they were not knowing what's happening right at that point of time, what's the expectation of the industry is. And I don't blame them. Basically, it's the curriculum, it's the design, of the curriculum, delivery of the curriculum that matters a lot in actually, giving the right kind of education to the students. So I always felt that there is a gap between what industry wants and what academia delivers. And this, proverbial gap between the cup and the leaves causes a situation that in our country, we produce thousands, and if not, more than that, lakhs of graduates every year, many of whom finally find themselves not employable. And that is one factor that has been bugging me quite a lot. As I told you that more than 2 decades I've been in the industry in a managerial role and going up all the way up to a very, very senior role, as profit center heads and vice president of a, corporate company. I felt that unless this gap is breached well, we will continue to produce graduates, we'll continue to produce engineers and MBA, graduates who will not come back into the industry and start delivering from day one. they need to be retrained. A lot of unlearning and learning has to take place. So that was one of the motivation why I felt that it's time for me to contribute my bit. And that is the point of time I came out of the corporate job and entered into education sector.
Great, sir. At least we are very happy that you are in the sixth sector.
Thank you so much.
So, sir, going forward, like being the director of the university, of Presidency University, so like, what is your philosophy of leadership? That's something which we would like to understand. And also, how would you like to describe your leadership style?
Very interesting question indeed. What typically has happened, if you look at the education sector in general in the country, it's driven by entrepreneurs. The corporates or the large groups are not into education in any big way. So therefore, if you see the character of an education institution largely depends on the key individuals which is driving that particular education institution or the group of institutions. The character takes the shape of the leader. So the corporatization in the education sector is not as much as it is we find in the developed countries. All right. So therefore, typically, what needs to be done is that the education sector has to come up and start implementing a lot of professionalization into the system. Okay. In effect, what will happen is that we will be attracting large amount of talent from all over the industry, and that particular gap between the industry and academia I was talking about just a while back can be bridged to a large extent. So that's number one. Number two is that what is happening is that back into the corporate world, there is a very well established process of human resources management, talent acquisition, nurturing the talent, and ensuring that the right person is put onto the right job. I mean, of course, what I'm describing is a little more ideal than usual, but that's how the process operates really. So here, in order to create, a proper teaching, learning system, where the students come, they are trained, they're given the necessary skill set, they are guided, they're mentored, and then they're sent out as a finished product into the industry, which industry will be eager to lap up, right? So in order to do so, what we essentially need to do is to do a very, very substantial change in the structural shape of an educational institution. So one of my role, as a director of this group is to ensure that we inject a large amount of professionalism into our group of institutions and the university, and therefore we create a platform where talent is naturally attracted. The talent feels that they are having the right kind of forum to express, right, their innovative mindset. They are given the right kind of empowerment so that they can nurture the curriculum, they can modify it as and when required, and then they finally ready to deliver what is required for today's world.
All right, sir. Moving forward, coming to Presidency University specifically, so how do you strategize about the key programs and plans for marketing and the administration of the university?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, university thrives and survives on the right set of students. And the right set of students will walk in when we offer the right programs with the right kind of curriculum. Now, what typically has happened, a large amount of change that has already taken place in our country, over the last 2 or 3 decades. Presidency University is a private university under the state of Karnataka, okay? And Therefore, we have a large degree of autonomy, so to say, though we operate under, the auspices of UGC and AICT guidelines, but we have certain degree of autonomy to design our curriculum, design our programs in such a way that when these programs are offered to our students and then they learn through that program, and when they come out, they become a sellable product. I'm using more of a not exactly the education lingo, but I'm using a corporate lingo deliberately to tell you that today the universities and educational institutions must think that when they're nurturing a student, they're nurturing a young mind. Ultimately, the objective is to make them economically employable product. You understand what I mean? Basically, ultimately, the end objective of education is to make a person productive, right? And be able to add to the, GDP of the country in a positive manner. So that value addition or the economic value added must be created by the student, and that should be one of the objectives, of the curriculum design. Now, what we essentially do is that we start with that process, right? We introduce a large number of programs which are being required by the industry today, right? We interact closely with the industry. Our board of studies is filled with a lot of members coming from the industry, and they give inputs to us on a regular basis. So we modify our curriculum, and part of the administration as well as the marketing program of the university, we reach out to the student community and we tell them, hey, look, here you are entering into your higher education portal right now. It is, say, Presidency University. You are going to become a graduate 3 years, 4 years, 5 years down the road. Be it a program, which is a BBA or a BCom program, or it is an engineering program, a law program, or even an MBA program. So when you are passing out, a minimum of 2, 3, 4 years have passed by, and the way things are changing in today's world, what is relevant today will not remain relevant tomorrow. So we need to give you inputs which is relevant for tomorrow and not for today. If I keep focusing on what is required today, you will be suffering from what is known as the risk of obsolescence, right? So my role as the director of Presidency University in designing, an administration and marketing program which is focused towards telling the student and the parent community that here is a university for you, which is constantly thinking about how to make you successful as you walk out of the university. So our curriculums are designed like that. Our delivery systems are designed like that. We have what is known as industrial practice and professional practice. At the end of, semesters, we take the students for anywhere between 6 to 8 weeks, to give exposure to the industry. So this kind of industrial and professional practices will actually expose them as to what is happening on the battlefield right now, and not what is written, in the book, which was possibly a case study or some theory which was jotted down sometimes back, right? So this is how our curriculum and our offer to the students and the parent community differentiates us from many other peer universities.
Perfect, sir. So moving forward, so the education systems in India or probably the other foreign countries are structured pretty differently. So in your experience, what can an inbound student gain from studying in your institute?
Yeah, I mean, if you're talking about the difference, one of the large difference between many of the traditional Indian institutions and the education system that is prevalent in the developed world is that right from the early childhood, all the way when a child walks into, an higher education system, there is a somewhat undue emphasis on rote learning systems and processes. Our teaching methodology, the pedagogy, is oriented towards a monologue where a teacher teaches and the student is supposed to, hear and take a note and learn, etc. Right? So it is not a dialogue based, it is more of a monologue based. A. B is that when it comes to the assessment system, you will see the assessment system also gives a lot of emphasis on reproducing what is already written in the book. Now, my question is that if it is written in the book, right, and when I go out and face a practical situation, I need not understand the definition because I can read. I can read and I can see what the definition is. I must know how to apply the definition into the practical world. So today, in the developed countries, you will see the whole education is far more application oriented rather than, theory oriented or rote learning oriented. So what essentially we are trying to do here is basically bring in that practical aspect of education, right? We are implementing what is known as outcome-based education or OBE. Now, what is happening is that the way the whole pedagogy has been designed, the assessment system in Presidency University has been designed, what we tend to do is to make the student to become a thinker, right? That's point number one. The another aspect of our education system, which is, which has been different from the developed world, is that we kind of push the student to become dependent on the teacher or the mentor, because they tend to look up for an answer, right? In our process, we have changed that upside down. We said that we need to create lifelong learners. And therefore, in our classroom, in our debates, in our discussions, in our assessment process, we deliberately make the students to answer questions which are more open-ended. There is no right or wrong answer. The analysis, a critical analysis plays an important role rather than giving the definition or writing the descriptive answer. So the critical analysis part, the case study methodology, analyzing problems, group work, right, and bringing in the the practical aspect by merging the practical aspect with the theory. These are the few tools that we are constantly using to ensure that our education delivery matches up to the best in the world.
Right. So the next question that I have for you is probably like, so what do you think that should be your institute's top priority over the next 10 years?
To answer this question, let me, quote what is famously known as Moore's law. The famous law which was set up by in the 80s by the chief of Intel, where he said that every 2 years, the IC would be having double number of transistors. Essentially, though, this is more of a technological statement, but what it says in essence is that the body of knowledge in our world, particularly when we are entering into the digital age, is going to double, every 2 years or even less than that. So what we are seeing today is that what is a relevant knowledge today, what we know today, is becoming quickly, obsolete or stale 2 years down the road, right? Now, with the advent of the World Wide Web, with the advent of the smartphones, with the advent of artificial intelligence and machine learning concept and the deep learning concept, with the advent of Internet of Things, the way that technology has progressed today, that the knowledge that we normally acquire during our graduation study, few years down the road becomes somewhat obsolete and not relevant anymore. So that essentially requires a continuous learning, ability to learn on a continuously and be on that journey. That's why I was pointing to that, issue of self-learning is important in Presidency University. Now, when you are talking about 10 years down the road, you can imagine that the whole world is going to look very different from what it is today. Many of the jobs, I typically take the example, of either a typewriter or the photo films. The photo films, whoever knew a company like Kodak, a billion-dollar company, would actually, come down to dust as the digital imaging, replaced the typical photo films altogether. Or the typewriters, which used to be so prevalent during the 70s and 80s, became rendered completely useless, right? And today, with the personal computing available on the mobile devices, it's a very, very powerful, systems that we have right on our palm, right? We are holding in our palm, and we can virtually access any amount of knowledge that is available on the web, right? So therefore, what we need to understand that the world is going to move fast and over the years as we go forward. So therefore, what we need to do essentially is to keep our eyes and ears closer to the ground to find out what all changes that is taking place. I give you an example. Say, a few years back, you might have heard about, the concept of cloud engineering. Okay, and cloud has become a big thing because people realize that how much can I invest in my hardware as my requirement of storing data goes up, right? And as my requirement of having various application, enterprise-wise application goes up, how much of information can I store in-house? It's very difficult. It's very, also I have to maintain that. So it is not very cost effective. So therefore, people, basically grasp that cloud engineering or the cloud technology with both hands. I'm talking about even largest of the companies moved into the cloud. But then as cloud took precedence, immediately technology realized that it has certain shortcomings also, right? And the shortcoming is that when your data is stored far away in some server, thousands of kilometers away, and a lot of traffic is moving while you are working, and maybe the person sitting next to you is working, and around the world, billions of people are working together, fetching that data in a fast mode becoming challenged. So this creates a pain in the system, and that led to what today is known as a fog computing, mist computing. That means operating on the periphery of the cloud, not deep into the cloud, but I'll be operating on the periphery of the cloud. But this is just an example. What I'm trying to say is that today, as educationists, we must work with the industry and find out those pain points where our progress is getting affected, and what solution can I offer to overcome these obstacles, right? And that has to be brought back to the classroom and talk to our students, right? So when we are talking about 10 years down the road, we need to constantly upgrade and introduce new programs, right? And new teaching methodologies also, and interactions with the industry. Take up, live projects from the industry and deliver back to the industry. That's the model that works in United States. So making our teachers and the professors also a partner to the industry, so that they bring the knowledge back and incorporate into our system. So these are the systems and processes that we need to introduce, right? There is no single answer that we will take on a journey on AI/ML, or we take on a journey on introducing IoT or a blockchain. Yes, we are going to do that, but that is just a process, and that process must continue. What is we are going to introduce today, say in the form of let's say blockchain, a course on the blockchain or AI/ML, right? 2 years down the line, that there will be some advanced form of blockchain which we have to teach to our students. So this is a continuous process, and that's what we are keeping our focus on.
Right, sir. Right, sir. So when you first started with the Presidency University, that's last year, I believe. So what was the vision for the institute, and like has it evolved over time? And how far along do you think are you implementing that vision?
I joined Presidency last year, Presidency University and the Presidency Group of Institutions. And as a university, Presidency University is also a relatively young university, having set up in the year 2015. So we are just about to complete 5 years, 5+ years. Now, basically, the vision of Presidency University, resting on 3 pillars. Okay, one is innovation, second is inclusiveness, and third is internationalization. That is how the vision has been created. And so far, the journey has been very steady, and we have been making very, very substantial progress in these 3 areas. We have a large number of PhDs on board, right? Including the PhD scholars, the research scholars, as well as our professors and associate professors, right? So large number of researchers are already working on board. So that's the innovation aspect of it, okay? Then comes the inclusion aspect of it. What we have done is that we have introduced a large number of programs that covers, the students coming from all strata of the society. We have really, created, or rather removed the barrier for which a student who is either from an economically disadvantaged, right, or even in terms of the facility-wise disadvantaged students can come on to Presidency University and get an equal opportunity to learn. So that's the inclusiveness part. The third part is the internationalization. Today, Presidency University has, tie-ups with global universities like, for example, University of Texas in Arlington, University of Alabama in Huntsville. We have with the University of South Ural, right, and several other universities around the world, where we are doing both student as well as the faculty exchange, as well as constantly exchanging ideas, taking up projects, exchanging ideas, etc., etc. So that's the internationalization part of it. So on the 3 areas, so far we have made steady progress, right? And a point will come gradually, all these 3 areas will also start merging, merging itself. So we are started moving in that direction. For example, the university also need to be look at the foreign universities. Many of the universities have a very small component of their income coming from the students' fees. A large component of the income comes from the the kind of the consultancy work done by the faculties with the industry, right? University delivers research output to the industry and therefore earn. So we have started moving in that direction by merging this concept of innovation, inclusion, and internationalization, so that we become an industry with a large amount of endowment, backing us, so that we can take our research and development and innovation to the next level.
That's great to hear, sir. So what would you like people to know about your institute that probably they might not know?
One important thing is that I would say in Presidency University we have a system that every faculty is given the role of a mentorship. I told you that we are drawing students not only from the, I would say, the creamy layer of the society, who has got exposure quite early in their education. Today the students get to work on on computers, on smartphones, using some advanced computing techniques, etc. Even at the school level, they're working on robotics at the school level. But what are those schools? Those are the schools which are actually serving the privileged section of the society. We are drawing students from the rural belts also. right? So therefore, when we look at our student base, it is not purely homogeneous. There is a certain degree of heterogeneity, and this is good. That heterogeneity is welcome. Now, what we essentially do is that we ask our teachers to be mentors of a small group. Say about every teacher is mentoring about 10 students. They are constantly watching their progress, and if someone, because of whatever is the earlier shortcoming in their education system, is falling short of the expectation, the teacher will at the right time intervene and make sure that they are brought up to the speed. So that's one of the critical thing where we want to make sure that when we have a batch, right, while the batch is very heterogeneous in terms of their the upbringing, the economic background, the exposure that they had in their earlier phase of life, ultimately when they graduate and come out of Presidency University as a presidentian, in terms of their capability, in terms of their ability, in terms of their delivery, they are all equal. So it's some kind of a democratic system that is operating in the underneath, to make sure that every student who comes on board is looked after well, and when they're sent out, they become an ambassador of the university.
Right, sir. So next question, a lot of it you have already answered, but I wanted to understand, like as a director of the Presidency University, what do you feel that the university's greatest strengths are?
Well, the first thing is that I think I told you our vision is that we want to be an innovative university, right? So at every step, we keep that particular concept in mind, that we have to be innovative, right? So one of the greatest strengths that we have is that we are incorporating this innovativeness into the process itself. Innovativeness is not something like a destination. It is a part of the journey itself. So that is something that we are trying to incorporate, right? We encourage our students to think out of the box. That's one of the strengths. Okay, the students are allowed to, pick up projects. They are given the necessary support, including funding, to, execute things, the way they want. Okay. Then they go and compete with other universities around the country, right? Many a times they come back with accolades, right? With a lot of good words praising their effort, etc., etc. So what is happening is that this ecosystem of the teacher as a mentor, the student as an innovator, and the university management as an enabler, the three components put together, is our core strength. This is our core strength, and therefore, what we essentially do is that, as I'll repeat again, at the cost of repeating, I must say, is that every student who comes onto our university, we want to see that she or he becomes ultimately a very successful, individual in their own chosen course of study. At a subsequent period in their life, they might even change their direction. That's a different story. But when they're walking out of the university, they should carry that successful tag, around their neck. That is the goal that we always, keep in our mind.
Right, sir. Now we have spoken about strengths. Now, one thing which we all probably want to understand also is, what would be some of the biggest challenges that you see, not only for the education industry, but also for the university, for Presidency University?
Well, challenges are there. It will always be there. And I think today, the kind of challenge we are facing is absolutely unprecedented. Because of this COVID-19, what has happened is that the way education delivery system is going to work out in future is going to be very different from pre-COVID era, right? We might start with a little bit of a social distancing. We must ensure that, education is delivered to the students, using the digital mode, right? One of the critical challenges that across the country, and we have students being drawn from every state of the country as well as from abroad. Now, if you look at the rural belt, and as during this lockdown period when we started to deliver online education, we have found that some students are facing challenges. Their network is not strong enough. We wanted to do assessments online. We found that there are certain challenges because of the power failure, etc. So there are various challenges that is coming, but we are actually solving one after another. So that is something that is going to stay for sure. The second an important issue that we need to address is that how do we stay relevant and produce our products, that is our graduates, who are employable, and not only employable, they are sought after by the industry. We want to create a situation like the premier institutions have in the country today. In spite of being a young university, we want to create a situation where the large companies will be lining up at our doorstep to say that, hey, we know that your students are trained well, we know that your students are mentored well, we know that your students have been given enough opportunity to be innovative, think out of the box, and we want that kind of product to be taken into my company. Because one important and critical thing one must understand is that when it comes to, and I can tell this with a lot of certainty because I came from the corporate background, the company's one of the major objective is to deliver profit for the shareholders, right? So companies cannot afford to take someone and spend a lot of money and resources to retrain to make that person economically productive. So if we can give my client, I'm talking about the corporates who come to recruit our students, if we can give them a student who is already trained enough and ready to be performing on the job from day one, they want that. They will be more than happy to pick up such product. Okay, so that is one of the biggest challenge we constantly keep in our mind, and accordingly design our system, delivery system particularly, and the teaching learning methodology in a way that we make students who are industry ready.
Right, sir. So coming to the final question, or probably the final thing in the interview, so any suggestions that you would like to give to the current youth and the aspiring students that we have?
Yes, of course. I think I have already hinted that, and one of the first and foremost thing I actually will be, quoting from one of my, let's say, role model. Okay, Nelson Mandela. I quote not exactly what he said, but he said that education is one of the most prime weapon with which you can fight a modern war. Okay, so today's youth must keep this in mind. It is very easy at in the late teens, right, and just beyond the late teens, want to get diverted because there is so much of social media around us, and as you have seen that mental health has become a key issue today. Because of this, diversion of thoughts, we are constantly getting bombarded with, various news, right? Some of them are genuine, some of them are fake. We are made to live in a make-believe world. Okay, almost something similar to, that we see on a celluloid, on a film. We are made to live in that kind of a world, right? But that is not what the real life is all about. So the students today need to be focused, right? In their time when they are supposed to learn, they need to be focused and they need to keep this diversion away. So that is my first suggestion, because they must get educated to become productive for the next 40 years and of their life. If they're 17, 18, 19 years old or 20 years old, they have to be productive for the next 40 years. And this is the formative year when they need to pick up, those clues which will take them for the next 40 years and remain productive, number one. Number two, I also hinted at the issue of self-learning, because what we will give you as an input today is basically going to stay with you for the next few years, right? And as I said, that knowledge will become obsolete as the industry progresses. So we want to create self-learners who know where to find the answer. One of our objectives is not to give all the answers to the students. It is not possible. We want to create students who know where to find the answers. So therefore, my message to the youth, to the students group who are just raring to enter into their higher education and into the university portal, my message to them is that be focused, be a self-learner. Nobody can defeat you in life.
Great, sir. That's actually amazing. So I hope you've answered all the questions that we had, right? And we would end the interview over here. Any last thoughts, sir?
Yeah, thank you so much once again, Collegedunia and Souvik, for having me on board. And I hope that whatever I've shared, is basically the knowledge that I've acquired over almost 3 decades of my experience. And some of it, if it is useful for the students and the parents as a community, I'll be the happiest person.
Sure, sir. On that note, all the best to Presidency University for this academic year, also for years to come. And also, we hope that our association, goes on for years to come. Right, sir?
Thank you. We look forward. To it.
Sure, sir. Great, sir.
Thank you very much. Bye.